Joined by our goalie experts, Marty Biron, Jamie McLennan. Gentlemen, the Canadian goaltending depth has been much maligned recently. Who do you guys think will be Canada's starting goalie for Game 1 of the Four Nations face-off in February? Jamie, let's begin with you.
I think it's a lock that it's Jordan Binnington, because if you take a look at we'll call it the players around him, the goaltenders around him, none of them have had banner starts to the season. And when you take a look at what he's done, his body of work, how well he played down the stretch last year, how strong he started this season, his wealth of experience, him bringing Stanley Cup to the St. Louis Blues, I think it's him as a distant number one. And then you start to debate who's number two, who's number three. There's certainly a lot of qualified goaltenders, Stanley Cup winners in Adin Hill, Darcy Kemper, I think Stuart Skinner, who played 80 games total last year for the Edmonton Oilers, 59 in the regular season, and 23 in the playoffs, 82 last year. To me, there are guys that are capable, but it's Jordan Binnington for me at number one.
Yeah, I like Binnington there, and obviously his numbers have gone up a little bit here over the last couple of weeks. But when you look at the goaltenders that are going to be on the team at the end of November, they may not even be the best goaltenders at that moment, because you're projecting what it's going to be in February when the tournament comes around and if those guys are going to be able to get going. But, you know, there's a couple of other guys. Like you mentioned, Binnington, I agree, Noodles. But Samuel Montembeault, for me, has had the better start to the season with the Montreal Canadiens. But is Samuel Montembeault the type of goaltender that you say, hey, we're going to a best-on-best tournament and we're going to have Samuel Montembeault? He's not won a cup like Binnington, or Adin Hill for that matter. So I think that other goaltenders are ahead of Samuel Montembeault, despite the fact that he's had the better of the starts. But I wouldn't, push aside a guy like Cam Talbot. Look, I understand that he was an all-star last year and from LA to Detroit. But I think Cam Talbot could also come in here and say, hey, I've got experience. I've been around. I've played in the playoffs. And maybe I'm the best by the time we get to February. But for that, he has to be named to the team before the end of November. And that's going to be a tricky situation for Talbot and others that want to be on the team.
I think there is a debate, and it's a healthy debate, because the fact that the team has to be named so early, and if you are going to go with somebody who's hot, and Marty just mentioned Samuel Montembeault. Now, what are his numbers going to look like in early January and February if the Montreal Canadiens drop off a little bit? That is the biggest challenge. But you're right, if you get named early December and you're not playing well by February, and it is a coin flip outside for me of Jordan Binnington, then you start to introduce names like Cam Talbot. Maybe Devin Levi is standing on his head at that point or something. There's other guys that are capable of doing it. But that's why I come back to the experience, Marty. That's why I come back to Jordan Binnington, because he's been there and done that. And in a short tournament, you need somebody who has had their feet to the fire. And that's why Binnington's my number one.
But the fact that we're having this debate is not a good thing. In best-on-best hockey, Canada has been among the best for decades in goaltending. Price, Luongo, Rob, Brodeur, the list goes on and on. In this tournament, the Americans will likely go with Connor Hellebuck. The Finns have Jussi Saros. The Swedes have Jacob Markstrom. All three of them are probably locks. Marty, if that's the way things play out, where does Canada's goaltending rank going into this tournament?
Well, it ranks fourth, and that's the thing, right? Goaltending is 50% of the games unless you don't have it, and then it's 99% of the game. You can't overcome bad performances in net at a tournament, especially a short-term tournament like the Four Nations face-off. So, yeah, the Team Canada right now, when they look at their goaltending prospects and their depth, they're looking, we're a fourth. But the mass kind of opinion the last few tournaments that were best on best, either the Olympics or the World Cup, was, well, it doesn't matter who's in net for Team Canada. They have that good a team that anybody can win. Well, this is going to be really on display at this Four Nations face-off, because Team Canada is going to have a really good team up front and on defense. Well, it could be that they can win with just anybody in goal. They're still NHL goaltenders, but they're not at the same level at the U.S., Sweden, and Finland.
And I would argue that we just talked about it. Adin Hill won a Stanley Cup. Jordan Binnington won a Stanley Cup. Darcy Kemper won a Stanley Cup. Those are Canadian goaltenders that on the biggest stage, and believe me, this is the biggest stage in the National Hockey League because we're talking best on best. There's still some countries that have been left out here. So I would say that these battle-tested goaltenders in a short-term tournament, I think they'll be fine. But I agree. I think they'll rank fourth when it comes to just laying it out on paper, when it comes to pedigree. But let's not forget, the Canadian goaltenders I just named, all of them have won Stanley Cups. That means they've been able to go deep into the playoffs and get the job done.
Jamie, is there a dark horse candidate Canada should consider taking in net, even if it's just to be their third string goalie to watch and learn, that could be a big part of Canada's future in net?
I mean, Connor Ingram played very well the other day. And I'm sorry, he didn't play well in Utah when I watched him the other day, but I think he's a very good goaltender. I mentioned him earlier, Devin Levi. I think is a good young goaltender, needs experience. It reminds me of a young Marc-Andre Fleury, how explosive he is in the net. But, you know, that is the future. Those guys have to turn the corner. And Marty mentioned him. I don't know if he's a long shot or not because he's a household name in Canada, but Samuel Montembeault. Like, I think he's a really good goaltender. Unfortunately, his numbers, again, in Montreal, if they taper off a little bit, a team that's coming out of the rebuild, he may not have the sexiest numbers. But I think he's a battler. He's got a terrific temperament, and he's a good, we'll call it, young goaltender at mid-20s.
And for me, it's interesting because we talk about Jordan Binnington. Well, if you want to evaluate goaltenders, might as well pick goalies from the same team. And Joel Hofer, who's had a really good start to the season and probably the best numbers when you look at all the Canadians goaltenders, then you're looking at Joel Hofer and you say, okay, maybe he can come in and scramble things. He's performed better than Binnington. And, you know, they're on the same level playing field with the same team right now. So I think he's one of them that if you want to have a long shot and somebody that maybe could come in and scramble and get on the roster, if he plays a few more times in the month of November and solidifies that he is a good goaltender, he could be one that you keep an eye on because he's playing with Jordan Binnington, and those two can be compared head-to-head on the same team.
Something to consider of the current top 15 NHL goalies and goals against average in the league, not a single one of them is Canadian.